That's what I'm concerned. I'm on the edge of life and death. Yeah.
Right. So we're live, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this virtual discussion session with Professor Dr. Upendra Bakshi. Thank you so much for tuning in this Sunday afternoon, evening, whatever you may call it. And thank you so much for giving us the next 2 hours of your life. Now I'll be moving to the very, very difficult task of attempting to introduce or give a brief about Professor Dr. Bakshi. Professor Dr. Bakshi started his legal journey when he read law at the University of Bombay, where he holds his LLB and LLM degrees from. Then he got his doctorate from the University College of Berkeley in 1973. And then he started his teaching career at the Department of Jurisprudence and International Law at the Sydney Law School. This was from 1969 to 1973. Then he started and he served as a professor of law at the University of Delhi, where he was also the vice chancellor later, as well as he was also the vice chancellor of the University of South Gujarat in Surat and the honorary director research of the Indian Law Institute and the president of the Indian Society for International Law. Now, sir also serves as a professor emeritus at the Faculty of Law at the University of New Delhi. And he was, of course, what he's known for most is being the professor of law at the University of Warwick from 1994. And then he's been a professor emeritus there since 2009. Sir has been visiting an honorary professor at a lot of law schools all across India. To name a few would be NLSIU Bangalore, Nalsar Hyderabad, the National Law University Delhi, the Gujarat National Law University, and many, many more. Professor Dr. Bakshi has taught a variety of courses in law and even in science, in comparative constitutionalism, legal theory, comparative social theory, human rights, and these have come at the University of Sydney, Duke University, Washington College of Law, American University, the Global Law Program at the NYU, and the University of Toronto. Sir's work has been cited by the highest court, that is the Indian Supreme Court, and various Indian high courts, as well as by many appellate justices all across Southeast Asia, and even by the International Court of Justice. His work was cited as a persuasive authority concerning state succession to theory. Sir has been awarded honorary doctorates by the National Law School University Institute Bangalore and the University of La Trobe in Melbourne. The Indian Lawyers Association and the Indian Society for International Law recently honored him with his Lifetime Achievement Award, the first which was alongside Justice Krishna Nair. Now, I can go on, but I think let's move to what we've been waiting for, and I'll hand this virtual stage to Professor Dr. Bakshi. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, sir, and we all look forward to yours. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you indeed. Thank you, first of all, if I may start. Yes? Yeah.
Yes, sir, please.
Mr. Ariman Sharma, distinguished colleagues at the Lex Recusal, Law Corner, distinguished participants, dear students, and because I'm a practicing feminist gentle person, I don't divide human beings into two classes, two species, ladies and gentlemen. I have one expression that applies to every gender, that is gentle person. Although I'm in some trouble with my transference, but that's a process of evolution of political correctness. So I'm very pleased to be with you all, and particularly a word of thanks to Lex Macula for inviting me, and what is more, for being so indulgent and so patient. It has taken about 1.5, close to 2 years for this event to happen. And I'm very, very grateful for your indulgence. There are many things that came between the webinar and myself, but I think this might be a vintage presentation for that reason, in a sense. And you wanted me to talk about what is justice or judicial overreach, and I suggested several topics. Including these, that now I've settled on something called judicial duty, discussion, and dilemma. And these are very general themes, but I'll focus particularly on the interest you expressed, plus I might have something else in addition to say. Now, I think what's important for me is the discussion part. Not so much what I have to say, but learn from what you have to say. And all my life, I've learned many things, almost most things from my students, from my class. And therefore, one never ceases to learn. In fact, I think it was Oscar Wilde, but I'm not sure who defined the measure of the age. And he said that, Wilde said that one is old, one measures age, and one is old when one feels pain in coming across a new idea. So by those standards, even people in their teenagers, chronologically, could be very old, they may be pained by new ideas. And people of my age, near fossils, might still rebel in new ideas. Because India has controlled one IMR, but not the second. You must be getting used to what I call oxymorons. 20 oxymorons in this talk. The oxymoron one is these two IMRs. What are these two IMRs? One is infant mortality rate. And India has done very well in this regard. But the second IMR is infant mortality rate of new ideas. And I don't think we've done that well as we should have. So new ideas pass very quickly in this country, many countries, not particular to India. But as we attain 75th year of our republic, we should do something about it. Now let me start with this discussion with first pillar of the discussion will be judicial duty. I can spend all my time today and or I don't know how many weeks on this subject. All the subjects are very, very vast. And therefore, what I will do is to take very limited aspects of it. And you can add to it, amplify it by your comments and questions. There was a judge who is famous in common law. His name was Lord Coke. He pronounced as Coke, but I think he's not Coke. Coke didn't exist in his time. Coke came much later. Justice Lord Coke, or Coke, was asked directly by King James I. I've got very bad memory for tyrants, so forgive me if I might be somebody else king, but it was King James I. And King James I asked Chief Justice, it was Chief Justice, and they said they must follow the natural reason of the monarch. The monarch is the vicar of Christ, divine right of kings in those days. And therefore he speaks on behalf of divinity, outsider, not within. And his command is law. And Lord Coke said in a famous case in, I think, 17th century, he said, my lord, you're absolutely right. You are the monarch of all that you survey, the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty. And your natural reason should guide the whole realm, Commonwealth. However, we are limited big teachers, creatures of common law. And he said, we cannot follow your natural reason. We can only follow, and I quote, the artificial reason of the law. And that began the ship money case and many other cases. There began the seeds in common law of judicial duty. The judicial duty here is to follow not political reason, but constitutional politics. As I distinguished long ago, before we were born, I read a book called the Indian Supreme Court and Politics. I'm sorry that I was born much earlier. I can't help it. But I wrote that book, I enjoyed it, and it is basically the difference between constitutional politics or adjudicatory politics and power politics is a major difference. The only discipline, only check on arbitrariness of a ruler or a ruling formation or a state is the innate good sense of the ruler, of the traditions of Raja Dharma, I would say, ancient Hindu. But the constitutional interpretation given by judges lies on artificial reason alone. It does not accept all that power says. It seeks to recommit power to certain well-defined ends. The judicial duty is to pursue the artificial reason of law. And I don't know whether you thought about it, but isn't it very peculiar that judiciary is the only institution in the world, so far as I know, which not merely give reasons for its decision, but it publishes those decisions so that you can, at any given time, look at it, justice admission in public, and the decisions are made public. Whole industries have gone wrong. Now there is computer, and therefore you've got a CD-ROM, or much beyond CD-ROM, you've gone now. So that's it's the only, when you worship God, you don't give reasons. When you go to a temple or a mosque, you don't give reasons why you go, you just bow down. Just there was Guru Purnima, right? You worship your Guru and you don't give any reasons. Guru gave me this, you gave my answer for this, my answer this. No, you don't do that. Nowhere in the institutes of governance is there a duty to give reasons. Duty to give reasons is duty created by artificial reason of law. Why? The duty to give reason appears in Indian administrative law is because this is have to be objective, not subjective. Why the reasons be objective? Because the interpretation of law says power must be exercised for the purpose for which it is given, and no other. These are judicial doctrines. So from that idea, power should be exercised. That was Krishna's case in 1951 by Justice Ganendra. He said this. And the question concerned the labor law issue like a reference to industrial quarters. So this is fundamental. And I was instrumental in publishing an Indian edition of a very nice book by Philip Hamburger called Judicial Duty. And I think everyone must read that book because it's a long book, about 900 pages. But it's available for a very cheap price here. It costs so much in pounds and dollars. It's hardly 1,000 rupees or something. Universal Book Company has published it. I get no commission. I don't announce it for a purpose. I think it's a good book. I've asked, requested various judicial academies to buy it and to tell the judges to read it. And some judges have indeed read it. I'm very glad to say. Philip Hamburger traced the origins and evolution of judicial duty in the span of the book in common law tradition and in England. That's where an empire brought the law to us and many parts of the world, also to America, what is now America. So I think we should look at this book to understand how far the artificial reason of law has developed. Of course, in England, judges know the limits when they say parliamentary sovereignty exists. And Parliament can do whatever it pleases. The judges have no role, no power. They have not claimed the power to declare a law invalid on the ground that it violates right. In fact, there is no statement of rights for a long time in British law. It is only by tradition, judge-given tradition, by interpretation of law, that certain duties of fairness have arisen, and that's a part of our reason of law. But there is no legal requirement, constitutional requirement, that Parliament may not make arbitrary procedures arbitrary. At the most, when the EU insisted that UK should, it was pre-Brexit, the UK should have a human rights statement and human rights law, there a human rights act, but essentially what it says is that judges can give an opinion, and the opinion should be given to Lord Chancellor, saying probably for these reasons the statute might be invalid. It is for the Lord Chancellor to decide whether to take any notice of the judicial opinion. That's the matter. Very rarely has Lord Chancellor acted on the advice, and very rarely has the court proceeded. So parliamentary sovereignty is near absolute in Britain. Not a by and large a written constitution. It's a constitution without human rights declaration part. Everything is evolved in tradition. So judges had to interpret tradition, just as our pundits interpreted what you now call Hindu law, rishis. Maulanas interpreted Quran, and Parsi priests interpreted Zen Avastha. And Sikh and Jains evolved their own. So we live in a Judas-made law. There was no state. For 17th century BC, till the British came and established courts, we lived under jurisdiction of private persons. They're not jurisdiction, they're wisdom of private. So there's a lot of stories to be told. Judicial duties as developed by non-judicial actors, in our case. Now, I won't go into all that. I would simply say, because there is going to be a pressure of time eventually, so let me, I'm doing well. Let me go straight away to India. In India, judicial duty has been enshrined in a statement, which is international statement, but it was issued at what's called a Bangalore Declaration in late 1980s. I think Chief Justice Verma, but before that Chief Justice H.M. Beg pursued this idea of statement of judicial value. And the judges' cases, 3 judges' cases, are full of what qualities the judges should have. I won't go into any of this. We have judicial statement about judicial duties. The Bangalore Declaration became the UN Declaration for the Singhvi principle. L.M. Singh was a great lawyer, very good friend of ours, and they are known as Singhvi principles because he formulated them for the UN. And there's a whole literature around it. Code of conduct for law enforcement officials, not just the judges, but prosecutors, the police, and the judges. So we can look it up. Very interesting. So we have got this scope. But I want to come to straight away NJSC case. Partly it meets your concerns about overreach and activism and justice. Now, one of the difficulties I have is that in India we don't read cases. Forgive me, we are all head note specialists. We don't read the actual judgment. So at Delhi University, I started a seminar which is very popular. A semester was devoted and my classes were full, absolutely. There was not a spot left. I said, I am nobody to tell you how to read it. I am somebody to tell you how not to read. So I had a seminar on how not to read a case. I won't go into it. Then there was more demand for it, and I said how not to read a statute. Then I developed this as I went along. But still, reading cases, slow and careful reading of cases, is not in our DNA. And yet we produce very great lawyers and judges. So we have overcome the handicap, as it were, but we have its handicap. But some people might overcome it. Now, if you look at NJSC case, it is not only about a judicial collegium being invented. There are two judgments. One judgment is about recusal, and is signed by 5 judges separately, and each one has spoken on recusal. And after the recusal judgment is given, they have proceeded to give the NJSC judgment. Because the threshold question was, should the judges recuse? Should it be arbitrary? Should be left to each judge to decide? Or was there a judicial duty to decide a case? And therefore, Justice Care, for example, and somebody else took the view that Justice Care was very strong. Later on, Chief Justice Care, or he was the Chief Justice already, I don't remember. He had the view that recusal cannot occur. Period. You cannot recuse because under the 3rd schedule of the Constitution, you have taken oath to uphold Constitution and to do justice without fear and favor. A fear of lawyers saying you were interested in this case and that controversy, you were junior at that time of some firm that argued the case. Once you are a judge under 3rd schedule. You're a constitutional being or creature. And you have absolute duty to decide the case. Justice Chalameshwar, went to argue that there was a necessity, not to be legal duty. See, supposing all the judges, bar says, have a conflict of interest, and who will decide the case? One of the arguments was official bias. That you may not be a judge in your own cause. So, in appointment of judges, all the judges were interested how they are appointed. So, which judge will then give a decision if all were to rescue? So, Justice Chalameshwar said Sorry, it's a constitutional necessity. And we lay down the laws unless there is list. Justice Kerr said list, unless there is no list, there are no part dispute, operative dispute between lawyer, counsel, and the bar and the bench. Excepting, Justice Kerr said, excepting where they manifest pecuniary bias. The judge can't recuse. Kerr also said additional with the bench, with the bar. Justice Kerr said, the judges can't be chosen by lawyers. Because one of the factors of recusal is the judge goes out. And therefore indirectly we choose the bench. And said this is not a tradition of common law. Judges by merely being mentioned should disappear from the court. Justice Badan Loko wrote a separate opinion. I won't exhaust you with this detail, but he said, well, sometimes recusal is necessary. So judge must write a detailed reasons as to why that. These reasons should be justiciable. But it is not left to the judge to withdraw quietly. You can file the SLP or a review petition about a judge. So, but nobody has read this part of the NJSC judgment till now. And after the NJSC judgment was given, judges have followed the systematic policy of recusal. In the state of Gujarat, the High Court, 9 judges recused from hearing a case in which a particular person was in the regime at the union government, saying we can be accused of bias, or we have paid appointment lawyers, or whatever. So recusal thrives as if the court had not decided. So how can we talk about judicial duty where judges themselves don't follow their own ruling? Technically, 5 judges have given this decision, and it is 141, Article 141, law declared by the Supreme Court, binding on all the courts, indirectly on all of us. But we don't have a discourse. I'm the only mad person, insane person, who written on this. I kept on following this recusal, talk with the bar, you were code of conduct, you have something. But they've gone back to the old page, as if the judgment was not written. Now, who has the instituted the Supreme Court? Who has this power the Supreme Court? Bar and the bench. How can you cancel a judgment? It's not the executive which has not followed the judgment. The judges who have not followed the judgment, and the lawyers who have not followed the judgment. Similarly, in Delhi law's case, the Lieutenant Governor Delhi case, there is a prior judgment of 5 judges, that Justice Deepak, Chief Justice Deepak Mishra, and before that, setting a judgment on constitutional cooperation and purposive interpretation. And the second judgment is about actual ordinance or law regarding the powers of Delhi Chief Minister versus Delhi Lieutenant Governor. Nobody, even till today, has bothered about what the judges said in the first part. They only looked at the second part, which deals with the past. Now, this is not on. You cannot. How do you get a judicial duty? You get it painstakingly by going through the constitutional materials which are binding on you, by giving a view on it, by sorting things out, there are problems with it, but by non-reading. Whereas lawyers have developed the habit of reading that which never have to be written in the Supreme Court, by the Supreme Court. For example, in an Ayodhya case, there is a judgment It is not dissenting. It is not concurring. Which is not even signed. 5 judges signed, 5 judges bench. Here's the matter. Decide one way or the other. Now, how can a judge, have you heard of anywhere in the world where a judge refuses to sign, put his name, his or her name to a judgment? So I wrote in the index an article which contained the observation that as a citizen I am duty bound not to read that portion, 121 pages. I might know who that person was. I'm very curious what he said. He might have said some right thing, but can they form a part of Supreme Court cases or reports? How can answer and judgment be a judgment? So, don't let me get excited. How do we get gather judicial duty? Only from authoritative legal materials, by interpretation of that. And I have a theory of 3 C's. I won't bore you with it, and I move to the next topic. The 3 C's are basically C1, C2, C3. I have a list of C12 now, but I won't do that. C1 is constitutional text. This was my 2000 Cardozo Law Review article. Constitutional text is C1. 2, constitutional law as expounded by the court is C2. 3 is constitutional theory or ideology. Whether socialism or capitalism or mixed economy or whatever you have. Normativity of the constitution, rule of law, separation of powers, etc. So you gather this judicial duty. You are under duty to gather the judicial duty from these materials. And therefore, I don't think we in India have worked very hard on that. Apart from 1 or 2 crazy people like me inside who do, and then our friend reads out all the doctorates and all this. I must be very happy when I receive some recognition, but only in order to bypass you. And not in order to follow it up and say you're right or you're wrong. That doesn't happen. So I believe in de-pedestalization. You must not be on a pedestal. You must be on the same level as a common citizen. And point out where it is right, point out where it is wrong. Anyway, discretion. Let me state by saying something seemingly very controversial, but in fact is not so. Let me say there's a fairy tale of political propaganda, cultivated propaganda, or a lazy judgment. I don't want to. I can't say anything. But either one of the 3. To say that there is a case of judicial overreach. I don't understand this expression because I study C1, C2, C3. And as I said, I developed to C12, citizen interpretation, army interpretation, business interpretation, executive interpretation. I've developed C1 is not only law declared by the Supreme Court, but law is understood by other agencies, government and other media, and so on. But why is it propaganda? It's a propaganda because it wholly is based on what the Constitution does not say. For example, Article 32 has been described as the soul of the Indian Constitution. What does Article 32 do? It's a right to constitutional remedies. The Supreme Court, and I written an article before you were born, I'm sorry about that, by 1973, on who watches the watchman. Based is ipsosis custodiet or something. Because the Supreme Court itself said that under 32 we can do whatever we like. And Mr. Chief Justice Bombay also said something like that. 136 is the jurisdiction. How dare they say it when they were taking a constitutional oath? And in the article I gave my reasons as to why Article 32 does not merely confer power on the Supreme Court, but also impose the duty, a constitutional duty, a judicial duty of the Supreme Court to accept my petition and decide on it. 226 is discretionary. The High Court judge might think you have a fundamental right, but may not decide the matter. 226 is discretionary. Any other purpose. 32, you am I right to constitutional remedy. What is the control of that right? My right can be decided upon my death. You cannot decide a case at your convenience. You must decide in one generation. You can't have intergenerational justice. One generation, two generations, three generations, you pronounce an absolutely dead. What is the use of pronouncing this or that way? I have brought the case before you. So it's a violation of fundamental rights. This is only for that. But that is a substantive right. It is not a favor that the court does. And yet, we know what happens. And this is very wrong. So where is the question of overreach? And the Supreme Court has 132, 32 is a duty, 136 is special petition, 141 is law declared, 144 I think is all civil and judicial authorities have come in the aid of Supreme Court. And you read the Constitution. I think the real problem is not, my friends, overreach of the Supreme Court. What then is the real problem? The real problem is underreach. Judicial underreach is the problem. Where the judiciary should intervene, it does not intervene. There are cases like that. Or it intervenes when it chooses to intervene. I don't know how many cases are 30 years pending in the Supreme Court, the 32, 40 years pending, 25 years pending. I've commented on Premchand milkman case. It was excised. Premchand, this case was reported last year, and I wrote it. But who bothers? I wrote about it. I still write it. It took me 30 years to decide whether the man was guilty in the full respect. And I went in 32. The 32 is my right, a citizen's right. So I think, as far as 32 jurisdiction is concerned, it is not the same as any other. 140, 136, Supreme Court may entertain a special petition or may not entertain. Supreme Court may give directions, may not give directions, 142, complete justice. These are discussions, it's are privileges. There's a man called William Wesley Hofer, Wesley Newcomb Hofer, who died young at Yale, wrote a small book called Fundamental Juridical Relations, Legal Relations. And in it, his thesis was the expression right in common law is overworked, and he divided 8 types of things you mean by right. I won't go into it. But one of the things he said, privilege, and opposite of privilege was absence of duty. So other things are privileges. Supreme Court may entertain your special SRP or not entertain. It doesn't bother. But 32, the only privilege, no right relationship is, in 32, is to determine appropriate proceedings. The Supreme Court can say, you should do this and you should use, but can it decide arbitrarily what appropriate procedure is? Can you say it should all be filed at 1 o'clock in the morning? That would be obviously not. Obviously not. There are certain limits. So it's duty all the way, but there are some privilege, liberty aspects to it. So I do not think everybody talks, just to skip a lot of scholarly discussion, everybody talks about Sivkant Shukla case in emergency, where the court did what it did. Denied habeas corpus. Right. I said it's a very bad thing, atrocious thing. Justice Khanna, great judge. I agree with all that. Now they know that. I don't take anything away from the arguments presented against the validity of visa. They're not valid then. Not valid. Now judgment has been overruled. The only judgment overruled in the history of the Supreme Court, where a sitting judge is the son of a previous Chief Justice of India. And kudos to that. That's a rare thing, but an important thing. Some judges went to the extent to be buried 5 fathoms deep. I agree with that. Some difficulty. But our difficulty, when nobody takes account of the second judgment, which was delivered in 76 in the height of emergency, Indira Gandhi versus Rajnarayan. Nobody concentrated. And who decided it? Justice Chandrachud, Justice Matthew, Justice Beg, Justice Khanna. Some of the dissenting judges in case of the party embraced basic structure and said the 39th Amendment, which says no appeal and cross appeal against election disputes of President, Prime Minister, Speaker, etc., 4 officers shall be ever enter the courtroom. And judges said, no, sorry, ma'am, we can't accept this. So that was at the height of emergency. There are 2 judgments which tell us one thing. They tell us many things. They tell us, and Keshwanda, of course, that power, all power, is constituted power. Constituted by what? Constituted by constituent power, by the Constitution. Under our Constitution, they say, no power is sovereign. What then? Under our Constitution, all powers are constituted and therefore have to be constitutionally exercised and constitutionally held. Huh? Powers, every appointed jurisdiction has powers, and these powers are superior. Our Constitution knows the distinction between sovereignty and superiority. And if you must find anybody who is a sovereign of the Constitution, the sovereign is the people of India. We, the people, gave to ourselves this Constitution. But this is the arrangement, and therefore, every branch is supreme in its own field. I remember asking the Chief Justice Senior, Chief Justice. I was the longest serving Chief Justice, 7 years. I said, sir, the Chief would tell me what's the difference between Nyaya Sarpanch and Chief Justice Vijay. Very, very angry with me, cross with me. And publicly rebuked me. I said, you can't rebuke me. And I answered my own question. And my answer was, the Chief Justice of India is supreme within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Very often lawyers call it Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India. Government also calls it the Supreme Court. Not Chief Justice of India. How does the Chief Justice of India become Chief Justice of Supreme Court or vice versa? It's an important question. I would go into it. I would take it. Essentially, therefore, they have formed this idea that there is no strict separation of powers. Now, the word strict is very important. Right from Ramjawar Kapoor, 1955, to Keshwanda Bharti, to Bombay, and onwards, they say all the time. They say no, our constitution does not understand the strict separation of powers. What does it mean? That every power has to be held in the constitution and tested on constitutional grounds. No power is sovereign. Now, judicial overreach, one can argue, happens when the Judiciary, Supreme Court, preaches to other powers, other power holders, parliament or executive or universities, but itself claims not to be bound by anything. And is it the case? That's my third point, the dilemma. And I'll now go to the end, student, 5 or 10 minutes. I think the real problem is that of underreach, not overreach. Now, the third idea of judicial dilemma is a very difficult one, even to articulate. Judicial activism is just a word. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing. I've used it out of courtesy to people understand. But it's a nonsense, non sequitur word. Because an activist, I've said in my Courage, Craft and Convention, my second book on Supreme Court, the first chapter, I've said, if you're interested, you follow it. If not, no problem. But essentially what I've said is that it's a label. I took this idea from labeling theory in criminology. Put some label on me, and I'm known as such. Law works by stereotypes, by labeling, accuse, convict, bail, deny. Everything is labeled at the back of law. Or punish, stigma. Permission denied. That's the bail denied. Activism is a label. And anybody, yesterday's Justice Gajendra Gadkar himself said to me, Chief Justice Gadkar, a young rookie, just not even, I was working in the university, teaching in Sydney, I had come and I went back to Sydney. And Chief Justice Gajendra Gadkar held my hand and said, Bakshi, go back to Sydney. Why are you here? I said, I've come to Indian University. He said, what is there? There is no future for legal research in India. I said, why do you say, Chief? I don't know anything much about it. And he said, Gorakhnath, Supreme Court has inflicted a self-inflicted wound. That was his word. I don't know what you say about Keshwanda Bharti and Bombay and subsequent decisions. Old process of SAL, social actual litigation, what you call public interest litigation, quite wrongly, that's another matter. So this is journey. And therefore, it doesn't help clear thinking to say somebody is activist. Anyway, no judge is consistently activist. Take Justice Bhagwati, take Justice Krishna, take anybody whom you call an activist. The activist is certain area. Justice Bhagwati was very strongly pro-SSC in tax cases, pro-revenue in tax cases, not pro-revenue, pro-SSC. If you're a tax lawyer, you would find it very difficult before that bench, Bhagwati, Chinnapalli, Krishna. But it was not the name of individual freedom. It was not fundamental rights. It's just attitude. But he was very progressive in terms of standing, in terms of PI, in terms of SL. As you know, Bhagwati Krishna So no judge is consistently one or the other. That's another problem with this labeling, activism, and pessimism. No, that's not in India, anywhere else in the world. And if I tell me in Asia, maybe people pondered ideology upon kind, that's a different matter. But ideology knows its limits. So I would think judges, where do they derive the idea of constitutional discipline? This is my last break remark, and then move to discussion. Where do they derive? And there are two ways to derive restraint on judicial power. One is in the name of judicial duty. The artificial reason of law is an artificial reason of law, not of an individual judge or an individual lawyer, however eminent he or she may be. But what is that law? The one source, and Professor Carl Llewellyn at University of Chicago, great giant who founded Yale School of Jurisprudence, he used to say, the first year law students in first semester, what did he say? He used to say, do not look at what the judges say, but look at what they do with what they say. Right? Look at Olga Tellis. Olga Tellis is hailed as a judgment giving housing rights, shelter rights to the poor, pavement dwellers in Bombay. Actually, Olga Tellis is venerated for opening up the fear of right to housing. And that's later on. But in Olga Tellis, there was no decision favoring the pavement dwellers. In fact, the last paragraph of Olga Tellis says, "Oh, you Commissioner of Police in Bombay, as far as we are concerned, you can throw them into the Red Sea." And that's what they would have done. But for the fact, it had nothing to do with Supreme Court, that a young activist, Sabana Azmi, a film star, fasted in what is now called Hutas Chowk, earlier called Flora Fountain, till the pavement dwellers' rights were observed to a point. So, situation meant had a happy ending compared to it. But as a student of law, I have said that I'm waiting for a judgment in Olga Tellis. What is judgment? A judgment is at least, Dr. Bakshimoran, is a unity between result and reasoning. If the reasoning goes north and the result goes south, exact opposite, you can east or west, whichever is your favorite. Then where is the judgment? So Olga Tellis has no judgment. First duty of a judge or body of judges is to deliver a judgment. It has to be a reasoned judgment. It has to observe a minimum discipline of unity, of obligation, that is result, and reasoning. Now against this view is the view. Chalta hai. I can't take it seriously. Judicial duty is not chalta hai. Duties are duties. But excuse me for lapsing into Hindi, but that's what I hope you understand it. Or to Assembly Bakshimoran, I've just invented the phrase BAUP. BAUP means business as usual paradigm. So Chalta is the same idea, but when Bakshi says BAUP paradigm, it looks more weighty. And people talk about BAUP paradigm. And it really Chalta. Judicial eclecticism is not performance of judicial duty. Judges are duty bound to give reasons for their judgment, and they are duty bound to give judgments. Now, of course, the Indian judges have invented new styles of judicial review. It's well known to every student of law that there is something called judicial activism and judicial restraint. I won't elaborate, I don't have time. That's the Western theory. What Indian judges have elaborated, now I've said it in my Mechi book in 75, that we have elaborated to more types of judicial review, judicial power. What is it? Instead of judicial activism, we invented juristic activism. And the judgments speak to the future, not to the present. So they go, outcome goes south, but this reasoning goes north. And future, it will pick up. Juristic restraint is the other side, where you will not decide a case beyond a point what the case says. Or decide the four corners, legal corner, your institution, like specula. I hope that's not the case, but that's where it comes from. The idea is that you can't go beyond four corners of law, whatever that is. So there is where do they get it? First they get it from external ideas of judicial duty. Judges must decide. The reasoning must correspond with the result. In some cases, they may do with justification juristic activism. But it is weighed in each case. Now, for example, I'll end now, positively. Just randomly, take some examples, juristic activism and judicial activism. Justice Sikri in firecrackers case. Every year he issues directions, they can't do. You said, should judges decide this case? Of course they should decide the 32 if it is brought to 32. There is a whole ministry in union and states which can decide that pollution is too high and they have pollution figures, they all data. They don't decide. I have a right to plead, then I come to Supreme Court. And the court can't even issue directive. It will be judicial overreach. How can it be? Take liquor vending, liquor shops on the highways. And again, they say you can't do that. No liquor shops near the highways. And what they do? Some states say there are no highways. That's the privilege. The presumption of constitutionality of state acts and some good laws and a lot of money in the process. Arguing for liquor balance, that's perfectly all right. I'm not against liquor. I'm talking only about this particular case. So, there are a number of cases where people say judges have not performed the duty. My view is if they have given the reason, if they are acting in jurisdictions, they are. And then the sense of discipline arises from tradition, the sense of discipline arises from retired judges, from the decision of the bar to hang the portraits of judges in the bar library, and they are very selective. The idea, the common law idea that lawyers are the judge of judges. It is very complicated, this idea, but they also set standards. The bench, the bar, together set certain standards of etiquette, certain standards of good judging, And this influence the discipline. The discipline comes from academic writers. Sometimes they exercise some power influence on judges and so on. I have a long list. So I think community of judges, community of bar, people at large sometimes say. You might have heard of a case, it would approve the conduct, but it happened in one of the districts called Kakadu. The human being went, said, probably not well mentally, psychologically, but he said he destroyed the computer, he destroyed the room, furniture, saying, मुझको इंसाफ ही नहीं मिलता है वो तारीख मिलती है. Now, he must have seen the movie Mr. Jolie LLB or Damini or what's that movie, new wave movies. He actually did. Now, we don't. This is not a proper way to address the judge or court on the problem, because this is just anger. So, but judges justify judicial review by faith in courts that people have. And that's also a source of discipline. So it is not the case that judges are, in defining their role, which is a very difficult job, are totally ungoverned by expectations. It is expectations by various agencies, community of judges, community of lawyers, tradition of law, by media, by politics. They exercise and diffuse pressure, which they refine and they develop certain standards and values. So I think there is a possibility of rich studies in future, if you have the time, that is, where in India judges get their sense of justice from. And how do they get it? Apart from their own learning and wisdom, that of course have to be considered and rightly integrated. So that I think I'll possibly end. I've gone on too long. Yeah, sorry about that. I finished.
No, sir. I'm sure everyone in the audience would love for you to go on even for another half an hour or even an hour. So I think it's a good place to start with questions. I think the first question that we have it sort of picks at something you mentioned in the beginning part of your address, wherein you refer to the NJAC judgment and how the collegium system works at present, especially with the recent appointments to high courts, where the Chief Justice of the High Court's opinion has not been taken into consideration, and a lot of other reasons that our current collegium system has come into criticism. So, how do you see the system going ahead where arbitrariness can be curbed as much as possible, and yet we don't have executive intervention in judicial appointments? An ideal system, so to say.
Judicial appointments?
Yes, sir.
Long time back, I was invited by Young Lawyers Association to celebrate their civil wedding at Hyderabad. And they asked about appointment of judges. That was this. And all the Andhra High Court judges had come. Supreme Court judges from Andhra had also come. And it was star-studded event. And I didn't know my place as Bible called me. I don't belong here. Neither a lawyer nor a judge. I produced them both, but that didn't matter. And they said, no, we are Professor Bakshi. Very impolite. And I simply say, India knows only 3 types of court. The first type, Lok Adalat. President of India does not appoint judges of arbitration or mediation. Kacheri, which is official courts. So they say, what's the third Adalat? Third Adalat, Palok Adalat. Parlok. Parlok means extra direction, extraterrestrial, cosmic. And I said, I'm in Hyderabad, and Satyasri Sai Baba of Purupati would not deny this. In fact, he said it publicly that his disciples become, if they want to, Supreme Court judges. He blesses them. So when judges are, and I said, half the Andhra Pradesh High Court judges are appointed by not the President of India, who does it formally, but essentially by Sai Baba, who is the incarnation of Bhagavan. Perpetual right people believe in it. I'm nothing against anybody's religion. So I said in Palok Adalat, the constitution is irrelevant. So the first thing you have to do is to have a system, and I think we have that system now, but we constantly examine the system of appointment, where there should be no spiritual or terrestrial political influence in the appointment of judges. So these people selected on the merits. Everybody agrees, they don't dispute about it. They dispute about what constitutes parity. And that's an unanswerable question. Every succession of judges have tried to define marriage, and some have succeeded. It's not the case. But there are limits to transparency. Please remember that. I had a small experience in South Gujarat and Delhi University, the Vice Chancellor. UGC said to us that you must invite all those who are qualified. I remember two situations where one post of a professor, and now the rules are to invite 150 people from our India. How do you select? How do the experts select one person out of the which are equally qualified by definition, eligible for the post? So all I did was to evolve a procedure. I said the procedure is the selection committee could have 30 minutes for each candidate. It doesn't matter how many days it takes. But it cannot be that if you have somebody for 5 minutes and somebody for 20 minutes and somebody for 1 minute. That's not possible. That's wrong. So one could evolve certain procedures which are transparent. But one can't deliver in substance transparency. So this word is used, transparency. But by definition, you have to make a selection. And if you look at district judges, there's a very high level of barking and grading and confidential report. In case of High Court judges, probably there is not that. So when they come to Supreme Court, or you take members for the bar, like the Supreme Court, where is the transparency? You can't have transparency. So in a sense, within limit, the choice is between executive appointment or judicial collegium. Judicial collegium, a lot of criticism about this. A lot of criticism, people have forgotten a lot of criticism about executive appointments. So no system of appointment is going to be perfect. No matter what power you try. But it doesn't excuse appointments which are made very late. For example, there is no justification. Date of retirement is not a secret. There is no justification for judicial vacancies. Okay, there is no reason. It's in a corporate governance terms, it's sheer inefficiency. But if you take under corporate governance, the don't apply to judicial governance. Why? So now the Supreme Court has itself laid down certain periods, 4 months, 3 months, for all the collegium to decide. That's a very good step forward. But if you have a question was at all about all this, if you mean by saying that people who never have been appointed are appointed as judges, I would think the handiwork of both bar and the bench. Judges on the law, if it is the case. I don't know. I don't have empirical grasp over this. I'm not studied the matter. But on the whole, judges, you can improve the process. We can find some additional steps to improve transparency of voting process, but there's a limit. That's a limit to it. So we have to A, get appointment of suitable persons in time. B, who will be suitable is very well articulated in the Bangalore principles, in judges' cases. 3, citizens of India, I've written this, wherein neither system know who is appointing our judges and why. Collegium or executive. They will never be transparent and there are limits to transparency. But even if they were, we will never know how many judges there are in India, appellate judges. 500, 600, 700, 1,000, let us say, for be generous. 1,500 maybe. But beyond that you can't go. High Court and Supreme Court combined. Not even 1,000. But let us say 1,000, 1,500. All one could say is that whatever the appointment is, process should be more consensus, there should be certain guidelines, and this should be appointed on time. There is no excuse for 75 in Indian independence. There is no excuse for a single judicial vacancy when there is such a huge backlog of pendency. Just not, but I'm not answering any question. You're sorry.
No, sir, you certainly have. I think I'll just pick the next question from your closing statement and
Right.
a lot of consensus from the chat that we're getting.
I'll note it down and 2 or 3 together. Then we take as you like, as you wish, as you order me.
I don't know, as is your preference, sir. We can go one by one or we can combine all.
No, I take 2 or 3 cognate questions and then move to another set of questions like that.
So the next question was upon how there has been a clear demand for over so many years that there is a need for more judicial manpower. We need hundreds, if not thousands, of more cases to cover the backlog. And this connecting to where you talked about how we've seen intergenerational justice, where people have waited lifetimes for justice. And even you worked with Justice Desai on judicial reform and judicial manpower a few years back. So I think if you could address that, seeing that going forward, because we've seen law ministers, law commission reports, and so just enough number of people have said that we need enough more judges. Then the next question that's come up is, how do you personally see the court's role in the evolving democracy as the people get more directly involved, either through regional parties coming up or through direct participation in courts and so on? Then I think the third question, and we'll cap it for this portion, then we'll have another set of 3, I suppose, is I'll combine all the COVID-19 and judiciary questions. So people have questions on how the Supreme Court or High Court and other courts have tackled testing, vaccination policy, labor codes. Of course, you wrote about exodus constitutionalism back in November or December last year, and how that's worked out a certain different stream of jurisprudence to come. I think these questions for now, and then we'll have more.
Yeah, very large area, but I'll be quick on this. First, I take the third comment about popular participation in administrative justice. How can people be involved? Now, you might remember that after Nanavati case, jury was abolished, and not a tear was shed. Nobody bothered about public participation then. Until now. And the reason why it was abolished was that juries are mainly to racism. Racism was the main reason of abuse of power. And racism operated in terms of white jury for white people accused and black jury for black people accused. There was some apartheid. And the black juries were essentially not necessarily pro-naturalist. Therefore, they were fancy convictions, but they had to follow the instructions of the judge. So, popular participation in justice appeared in the form of controlled participation in Lok Adalat later on, in terms of Gram Nyayalayas and Gram Panchayat, the whole 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution. Okay. It has also come indirectly through media. The role of media has been massive in this respect. Social media, which I don't have access to, but other people are more fortunate. I've observed a limit. The maximum I've gone is this computer and cell phone. And beyond that, I'm protesting against globalization, hyper-globalization. Therefore, in this life, I kept away from social media. Although I write on it and speak about it, but that's bookish, not hands-on knowledge. So that's how it is. I think it's very important what Jayaprakash Narayan is, so Lok Niti and Lok Shakti go together. When you only rely on Prabhu Satta, authority, which is of course not there in the constitution, but superiority, and shut out the people. And of course the justice is alienated from the people whom you do it. Now, one of the great difficulties, apart from what's the latest buzzword? Area. Area is for American institution, European institution. Very important is diplomatic mediation. But we have been practicing area for 1700 years. There are no official courts. Till Lord Cornwallis came. It was called among the tribal Jagro Bang, please break the quorum. But we never bothered about that. We took family courts again, Australia, Canada, and family court was happening regularly among tribals, among Adivasis, among untouchables, caste panchayats, among Muslims, among 100 communities in India. We never learned from that. So I think our model of law reform has to look inwards or outwards, without being insular, without being parochial, but just to de-westernize itself a bit. And the greatest obstacle to de-westernization is unfree legal profession. And that's the problem. Because I always used to say, legal profession is very striking in two senses of the term. It is very striking, and collectively handsome, and it goes to strike very often. Altruistic strike. I have a long unpublished manuscript on law strike. I studied the subject till 85. They are self-oriented strike, that lawyers are immune from enforcement of law, so if they are raided by incompetent officer, they go on strike. As the office of the court. And they are molested by the police. On of the whole Kiran Bedi episode, unfortunately, Sati, and so on. A number of police, lawyers, disputes. But lawyers generally believe in anglicized profession of law. They don't want people to participate. Because once I said to the presidents of India, I said, you worried about appointing right judges? I've got 4 names. Visited Mother Teresa and Baba Abde. And he said to me, what? They have no experience as lawyers. I said, what experience as lawyers? They have experience in integrity. Baba, core spiritual values. They don't worry about law or education or this thing. So this is possible to have this integrity of business. It's a mistake to think that popular participants cannot interfere that. It shouldn't be no go at them. Nyaya Panchayats, for example, women elect their own Nyaya Panchayat is a very good Nyaya is a very good experiment. So I think one. Secondly, I think I come to COVID just a minute. Oh my goodness. One of the great Bakshi traits is you can't read what you've written. Judicial appointments, I didn't get the question, what I told, definitely, but certainly we must, bar should stand as a, in my crisis of Indian legal system, I have a whole chapter on courts and crisis. It was in 82. It's now 2000, whatever, 21. It's still relevant. And I've just classified judicial delays into 5 the court delays, lawyer court delays, legal court delays, and so on. So I think, in a sense, we are all in it. The middle classes have developed a vested interest in a system of justice, it is called, but delayed justice. The more delay, the more the revenues. Somebody has to appear. You have to legal aid law, has to be paid someone. So, and they know, unfortunately, no limit on what fees can lawyers charge. So unless there is a fundamental reform of the bar, there can't be a fundamental reform of the justice delivery system. As long as it operates as a seller's market, buyers will not have any say. Take it or leave it. This is true of architects, of doctors, many professions which operate only seller's market. They sell their services. At a high price they dominate. There is no uniformity of pricing. Or they're all same skill, MBBS, MD, or whatever, doctor. Each doctor could have his own fees. And all fees are taken most of the time. Doctors, lawyers, and architects are taken in cash. Never by check. Very few lawyers take, I can count on fingertips. Then that exhausted. Can't be exhausted. So it's a problem. And it's a problem everybody knows about it. Some people like me talk about it. But the custom is not to talk about these things. This is the problem. So in a sense, therefore, we should not only, it's a problem not of what I call episodic reform, but structural reform. We are very good at episodic things. This man tortured, this man had bail, this man jumped the bail. These are very good. Injustice, any human being is injustice, that is well worth fighting, I agree. But our activism never looks at the structural conditions in jail, structural conditions in police work, structural conditions, our concern with structural conditions begins and ends only with judicial appointments. We are not concerned structurally with other aspects of the legal system. And you cannot think in these silos. That's my thinking. But not that question of judicial appointment not important, but it will be placed in a context. How many police people there are per 1 million of population? How many doctors there are? How many lawyers per billion population? How many per million judges? Then we are talking. But we can't talk in isolation, that's my belief. On the question of the second question, judicial manpower planning, Justice Desai, in fact, I wrote the report. You kind of accept most of my suggestions. It's under report. We call it person power planning, whatever. It has been implemented in part in terms of National Judicial Academy and so on. Some changes have been made. I've designed a curriculum which they have adopted. So that's fine. Some movement has been made. But as far as the judicial vacancies are concerned, I don't see any reason, again to repeat myself, of this evil to continue. And the COVID thing, I think number of, again, it's a question of 32 or so more of jurisdiction. Have the courts exceeded their authority? I have a nice word for this called demonstratical co-governance of the nation. When executive or legislature does not do its job, or does it indifferently, or not too well, then should judges step in or not? That's the question. And it is my feeling that judges have a duty to step in, right to breathe campaign. Everybody knew what was pollution, or how it was caused across the border, what means could be found, there were committees and all that, but no action was taken. If they take a coordinating role, I don't think it is trespassing on separation of powers. It's co-governance. I think judges have emerged over time as India's co-governors. And therefore, the accountability expectations that we have of representative institutions extend also to judiciary. That we expect them to perform better. And not simply say the executive is not doing its job, or parliament is not doing its job, or somebody else is not doing its job. Are you doing your job equally well, or in the direction in which you want other institutions to go? And there might be differences of opinion. My view is that in the second wave, judges felt that they must come to the help of the idea of right to health and right to life. That's the juridical language. That they had a duty, and not merely power, but they had a duty. Power covered duty. The right to life was citizens were at stake. They had a duty to nudge the executive, a duty to take over such a function of the executive. They found the executive was not doing its job. And that they've done. Now, again, the old issue whether judges should at all only decide dispute or should co-govern a country. I would think within the confines of discipline and within the framework of judicial duty, they have a certain role to play. It can't be silent. They may make mistakes, like everybody does. And then you should point out that those who want popular participation and administrative justice have a fundamental, what I call, social responsibility of critics of both. And we should develop our own canons of social responsibility. Can we decide this better? Can we handle this situation better? I always say in COVID times particularly, one must develop epistemic humility. Nobody has any answers. Scene changes from day to day. And therefore mistakes are bound to be made. But the question is whether you can manage to learn from your mistakes and do better next time. Be more prepared next time. This is the problem. And this is where the nudging function of courts, hoping and praying like social litigation, or otherwise, so motor jurisdiction, under 32. Judges ultimately in courts are trying to assist. This is not adversarial litigation. This is cooperative litigation. So I think it, but views are bound to be different.
Right. Sir, even though we've gone past our scheduled time, if with your permission, we can have maybe a couple more questions, if that's all right, sir.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that, but I speak too much and I should not make an interesting comment. I'm in your hands, but do what you like, what you wish.
No, thank you so much. We'll just take a few more questions and then first we'll end this.
With pleasure.
So, recently, and I think over the past few terms of the Chief Justice of India, there have come questions of what is the role that the Chief Justice plays. You did touch upon that in your lecture as well. Is the Chief Justice just the administrative head of the Supreme Court of India? Is the Chief Justice the ultimate authority on a lot of matter, or the master of roster, as they commonly say? Or is there a need to relook into the role of that the Chief Justice plays, perhaps even constitutionally? Or is there even a question that should the senior most judge should be the Chief Justice? And how would you address these questions? Because there have been a lot of talks, particularly over the past 5 or 6 years. The
Yeah.
infamous press conference, of course.
This should have been discussed in the past differently, but the so-called revolt of judges in 2018 or something, when for the first time 4 sitting judges of Supreme Court held a press conference and released a letter which it wrote to Chief Justice, then Chief Justice. And that letter raised 2 issues. One is the master rule, which is very much in the public eye, and the second, completely forgotten, is delay in considering collegium recommendation appointment. This part is walked right off. On master of rule, even the so-called judges in the court did not doubt for a moment the privilege and the power of the Chief Justice to frame a roster. They only said the way rostering power was exercised in this or that case was arbitrary. And certain degree they did not use the word, but for lack of time, I would say certain partiality was shown, favoritism was shown. That was substance of it, although they did not use this word. So, in a sense, if powers are invested in every constitutional functionary for a specific purpose, and if you use it for other purposes, it is wrong. It's a breach of constitutional duty and discipline. Whether in this case power was misused is impossible to determine because I don't think other members of judicial revolt team behaved any differently in when they became, some of them became chief justices and exercised the power of roster. I don't know. I've not studied the matter carefully, but I can say that by their own standards, um, they didn't worry too much about arbitrariness or like that. And once outgoing chief justice, present outgoing chief justice could not appoint a single Supreme Court judge. The collegium could not agree. So we have to be very careful in these matters, and I think long ago in a piece I wrote, which again, like anything, Bakshi says ignored, but it's ignored unfortunately. I wrote, it made a distinction between adjudicatory leadership of the court, the interpretation of the constitutional laws, Article 32, 142, adjudicating, and organizational leadership of the court. It's deals with administration, administrative leadership of the court. And the Supreme Court rules make it very clear. These two are different things. And we've seen this in cases of allegation of sexual harassment, other cases. Durgambini Paul case in Assam, she said no, she wants it to be her on judicial side. I want it to be heard on administrative side, the allegation against X and Y. I don't know what happened to this man. But see, in fact, we do had the matter withdrawn from judicial side to administrative side. Triggered preferred administration of administrative adjudication as against judicial adjudication. And I think there is a lot to be thought about administrative adjudicative leadership, organization. I think in which collegium will now also fall for the administrative side. And a lot of discontent from time to time have been expressed. I don't know whether it's addressed by the name democracy or the people or through a press conference. There are other ways to do it. I think the entire court should sit at least twice a year to look at the administrative patterns of administrative adjudication and administrative leadership, organizational adjudicative leadership, OAL I call it. And suggest ways and means. Because everybody is it's a small court, compact judges, 30, 35, too much, but not too much. And I think there should be one of the chief justices of India organized a retreat. I think Justice Thakur in the National Judicial Academy over one whole weekend, plus one day more. And they discussed about it. I think that's a good idea. And to do that every 6 months, they must find time for that. So that they can express views frankly to each other. And this is apparently happening other ways, I don't know whether there were conferences. But there are very few case conferences to how judgments are to be written. That also needs to be on the size of judgment. With the Supreme Court itself has recently proclaimed itself as a very prolix institution. I don't agree fully with it, but I think there are issues which are common to all judges of the Supreme Court, and on which they have something to say, not only Chief Justice. So nobody is saying away the powers of the Chief Justice. Just as there are conferences of Chief Justice of the High Court, All India Judiciary, and the Supreme Court Justices. Similarly, there should be inside Supreme Court consultations. I know time is a very rare commodity, just as it is here, everywhere. But it is possible to find some time. It is possible. And now they're better off. They've got research assistants and all that. They can exchange memos and to find some way to discuss these matters. And maybe they should not be non-public. So we should communicate to what they've discussed. One way of establishing transparency in the judicial system. We could even invite suggestions to the bar and other consumers of judicial services, other sections of society. They could do that. They could have a meeting with editors, have a meeting with thought leaders, academicians, and other people. Once in 2 years, why not? Now the little opening up is very necessary because they are overburdened people, overquested. The only Indians they know intimately are members of the bar. But with great respect, members of the bar do represent India, but not all of India. So that goes to popular participation question. They should meet, find time to meet more often. And once in a year, twice, once in 2 years, doesn't matter what. And won't be open to constructive suggestions by way of memoranda, well considered one. So I think it's a little play in the joints as it were required. Little modernization. Don't put all the burdens on the judges.
Right. I think, thank you so much for that, sir. We've already taken close to 2 hours of your time. So I think my last concluding question, and this is something that comes from maybe not as much connected to academia, but we've had over close to, I think, 250 plus students tune in, or even professionals, and you've been an inspiration to hundreds and thousands of law students in India and all across the globe. I think if there's just one piece of wisdom, if you could share with us to help us in our journeys of being maybe even professors, students of law, practitioners, maybe even hopefully we have a few judges, and maybe a couple of book recommendations that you would like to give. And I think that will be a really nice note to close on it, because anything coming from you experientially would be really beneficial for everyone watching.
I'll let you know certainly. I certainly recommend you start by reading, having study circle of this book, Judicial Duty.
Mm-hmm.
It's very essential. It's a core background reading for general concern with judiciary and legal profession. And how the role expectations about judges are formed. There's a classic piece of literature by Professor Herbert Westler on neutral principles. Judges should follow. And all of Dawkins' work, Ronald Dawkins' work, is based on the idea. A ideal figure was Judge Hercules from person. And the judge will follow only principles, books called a matter of principle. So there are academics and judges who Justice Siddhartha's own biography, my own Boswell. Some of the judges have written excellent biographies. In Marathi, which I can read, but Bengali I can't read. Some judges have written in regional languages, and some have written in English. And so this spy, who was advocate in Bangalore and Supreme Court, had written a lot of books on various judges of the Supreme Court. Biographical account. He writes for live laws nowadays, I believe. But this is doing a wonderful work of retrieval. The story Sadabji wrote a very nice book, and Arvind Datar wrote a book on Nani Palkewala. A1. It's written like law professors. It's a well researched and non-iconographic, non-Baba book, criticizing and appreciating. So these are some of the landmarks of current literature. And I do regularly write in India Legal. So you are welcome to those that we may express, whatever it's worth. My daughter tells me I write too much. It might be one of the reasons why I'm not read. But anyway, great one. Thank you indeed.
Right. Sir, I think I'd like to thank you on behalf of our entire team. We're highly indebted to you for taking time out of your extremely busy work schedule and been a part of this program. And you very readily agreed to whatever themes we threw at you, and you addressed everyone who's in the audience. Our registration forms showed law students, judges, lawyers, professors from across the globe. So, and they're all here to see you and your
Very nice.
your work. And we're really beholden to you, sir, for all the support you've given us and your perfectionist approach. As it's visible in your writing, it's also visible in your lectures, and I'm sure it struck a big chord with all of the participants. And I think those book recommendations, I was certainly jogging them down. So I think everyone in the audience will also be there. So on behalf of the entire team at Next Macula, I'll just say thank you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you indeed. Thank you. And thank you for comments and questions. Most helpful. I've taken huge notes, and some of it I can read.